Guten Tag und Grüß Gott. Today is Sunday, January the 13th, 2024. And, well, I suppose I should comment on the weather. It's a little chilly at night, but during the day, hey, it's okay. It gets to be around, 50, 60 degrees. So I do understand that both coasts right now are really going through a rough time with the weather. They're having severe weather and severe cold. We're aware that even the state of Washington is a little bit, on the east side of the Cascades, they're having like 30 below temperatures. Anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about the goings on for the last couple of weeks. And what we've got going is, a couple of big wars, So, and the reason I'm saying big wars is because, thousands of people have already died in both the Ukraine incident and now the more recent Gaza Israeli reprisal, for the Hamas attack on civilians. So anyway, we're a little concerned about it being escalating into a broader conflict because there are sides. There's Russia, which is a big, powerful nuclear nation, and then there's also Iran. And Iran and Russia, they're kind of exchanging technology. So they're producing drones and weaponry and so forth. So most recently, in the Gaza conflict, the Yemenis entered the picture, and they started to attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea with sophisticated weapons, missiles and drones and that kind of sophistication. So, of course we can't have that. But in the meantime, already oil is more expensive because, the shippers are finding other ways to go around, so they're not shipping through the Red Sea until this conflict is kind of resolved. But the U.S. decided to help out on that. And so what they did is they sent a bunch of F-35 airplanes, fighter airplanes, that can wreak some devastation, and they just knocked out of the Yemeni radar stations, of which evidently they had some 30 radar stations, and so they basically disabled their ability to see airplanes coming in. And so then they launched a second strike, and lo and behold, they're so confident that they've gotten all those radar stations that they send in F-16s, which are, a much cheaper kind of airplane, and, less stealth, but nevertheless, they carry also a bunch of devastation. So I've been saying that they're Yemenis. Well, yes, they're Yemenis, but they call themselves a religious offshoot of the Shia Muslim religion, and I'm not sure exactly what they called, but anyway, they were marginalized people in northern Yemen, and they got kind of pissed off at the government, the Yemenis government, and they started to take over. They armed themselves, and with the help of Iran, because Iran is Shia also, they armed themselves, and they got that help from Iran, and they started to basically fight against their government in Yemen. And the government that is recognized by the UN fled to Aden, which is, I think, in Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, it's a conflict, among Arabs in that area. But they also, and one of the articles in the Wall Street Journal says, that the Houthis, which is what they call themselves, also understand who's the real enemy, and of course that's Western civilization, us, America. So anyway, so that's what's going on, and of course in the Ukraine, we're still launching missiles against each other, and against the Ukrainians from Russia, and the Ukrainians are also hitting areas that are bordering Russia. But I think they're really avoiding to hit Russia themselves because they do understand that the aid that we're giving the Ukrainians is solely dependent on the fact, that they will not start anything globally with Russia, which would potentially drag us into that conflict. So anyway, that's basically what's happening now. And we're getting into the primary season, so the primary tickets are going to be filled, in places like Iowa and, I don't know, New Hampshire or New Jersey or something like that, one of the eastern ones. And so the candidates, are hammering away at each other. And we watched on TV how DeSantis and Nikki Haley went after each other, and it was brutal. It was actually really bad. I thought it was bad behavior on both of them, but if one of them starts to call names and call somebody a liar, what are they going to do? They have to come back with at least that much force, so. Anyway, I do have a stack of Wall Street Journals, because I haven't done a video for a couple of weeks, and I guess maybe another thing worth mentioning is that the president of Harvard, black woman that was found to have plagiarized some article that she took credit for, finally resigned. And but part of it was the pressure from, I guess maybe the Jewish community that she did not take a stance against Hamas. So she quit. I guess the plagiarism accusation, was the final straw. But personally, I was surprised, that a black woman rose to the presidency of Harvard University. And so, when our minorities say, hey, we can't achieve anything, well, I can point to that and say, look, okay, there's one that was able to achieve. And of course, now they're screaming their heads off of, oh, you're discriminating, because, well, she did a bad thing, and that's the reason, she had to resign. So that's worth noteworthy, over the last couple of weeks. But also, we're having trouble with Boeing aircraft again. The 737 Max. We just had an emergency exit door. While a flight was taking off from Portland, I think to go to Ontario, California. And so the emergency exit door flew off and it fell into somebody's yard. Jesus Christ, they don't even know how to inspect those things. So Alaska Airlines just, grounded their fleet, which is a really smart thing to do, because they've got to go through inspections. But evidently some other things are now cropping up on that Boeing has taken, is coming under fire, for taking shortcuts in their safety inspections and so on. But anyway, so these are probably the highlights of what's happening in the world. What do you think, Mom?
I think that's about right.
Now, I know you're busy wrestling the dog down there because the dog really wants to come up, and I'm sitting on a bed and doing this video, and the dog wants to come and sit by the window and bark from the window. Anyway, thank you for taking care of this, because
I'm trying.
We love this little guy, Anyway, so what I really wanted to talk about is since we're not done with war and so forth, I need to kind of reiterate and memorialize my experience with war and our family's experience with war. because here we were. Before I was born, my parents, I think they got married in 1938 or so, and they got right busy. And because I was born in 1939, and so they wanted to make family like right away, and so they did. So we were German citizens living in Poland. And you might say, well, what the heck are Germans doing in Poland? Well, you have to remember, you have to go back into history a little bit, because until the end of World War One, the part of Poland that my family grew up in, and I think they've been there probably for generations, was actually part of Prussia. It was called the Wartegau. And it was part of Prussia since about the early 1700s under Frederick the Great. When the Russians and the Prussians basically decided that the state of Poland probably shouldn't exist as such. And so what they did is the Russians invaded from the east and the Prussians from the west, and and basically colonized these parts of Poland, and left the Polish country kind of small and slim in between. I think somewhere around Warsaw, and I'm not entirely clear about this, but nevertheless, the Wartegau was populated by Germans, and they lived with Poles in the Wartegau, and even after the agreement after World War One, the agreement was hammered out by the victor, so to speak. That the borders would be redrawn, and so suddenly my family found themselves in Poland. Really in Poland, not just among Polish people, Polish-speaking people, but now. In Poland. And so, my grandparents, they decided, well, this is probably not a really good place for this. And I'm talking about the grandparents, Schlesners. And they actually moved away, because they were afraid that, the Poles would, do bad things to them. So they moved to Berlin and spent some time in Berlin. But as it turned out, the Poles really wanted the Germans back because, they basically drove the economy. And, they had most of the businesses, and they employed a lot of Poles, to do things. And it sounds kind of funny when I say Poles, I really mean Polish people, not telephone poles or anything like that, so. But anyway, so this Polish guy, was he married an American, and said, went to the police or somebody to complain. He says, I think my wife is trying to kill me. And he says, well, how do you know that she's trying to kill you? Well, she bought this thing called Polish remover, so. Anyway, my joke for today. Anyway, my parents, both of them, were fluent in Polish and German, and it was easy for them to speak both. And most of the people that lived in that area actually did speak Polish and German. And I think on the Russian side, it was pretty much the same thing, that they were speaking more Russian and German. So.
Your mom could speak Polish up until the end.
Oh yeah. Yeah, mom was fluent in Polish. Well, mom was a special character because she had higher education. She also had to learn Latin and Greek because she went to the German gymnasium in, I think, in Gurnau. And my dad, I think he went through the 6th grade, and so he learned to read and write, math. And he was really good at all of that. But that was the extent of his education. The rest of the education he got on his own. Anyway, let me get back to the war situation. So I want to start with a quote from the Bible. This is actually, I'm going to read that because it's and you'll see how that relates to what I'm about to say. So it's in Matthew 24 in the Christian Bible. Matthew 24 and verse 6 through 14 or so. You can look it up. And it says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen. But the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nations and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places." So this was written by Matthew, which was, 2,000 years ago or so, one of the disciples, of, at least we think that it was, okay, so all of that is a little bit controversial in terms of who actually wrote it, but, it was assigned to Matthew, one of the disciples. But anyway, this is what I heard time and time again from my dad and from my mom, is that before World War II started, there were rumors of war, and there were actually small wars here and there, scrimmages and so forth. Of course, the Bible verse talks about the end of days. So it's a quite a different thing. But I thought it was kind of poetic and appropriate, to mention that we seem to be in a time where there are wars and rumors of wars. And recently we had some earthquakes in various places, and famine in Africa, and other places. So, of course, the Matthew goes on and says, well, regardless, you will not know when the time comes, when the end of day is, and Christ will, appear for the second time. Or again, it'll be the second coming, so to speak, because I guess the resurrection from the dead was still the first coming, right? I don't know that much about the Bible, but, it was kind of interesting. So my dad was talking about, the Poles. They were really, really confident. They thought that the Germans, are a bunch of, no good nicks, that they're starving, because, they're all communists and whatnot, And in fact, they used to talk about that the Poles would fry their bacon for breakfast, near the border, and the Germans would accumulate, and to see whether they could smell some of this, So it was really, it's funny. Now, this made it into the history of legends, as something, whether that really happened or not. But I've heard it from several sources, not just from my dad. But so everybody was worried about war, and of course the war came. And maybe I'll talk about that separately sometime. But basically, my mom took me out. My dad thought, well, better get his family out of town. So that was, I was born in July of 1939, and the war started in September 1st of 1939. So he sent my mom out into the countryside to stay with friends because, they figured the Germans would probably bomb the cities, not so much in the countryside because there wasn't much to bomb, so he stayed in the city though, so you have to give him that. Looked after his business, whatever that was at the time. And so it had to have been kind of weird, for my parents, to know that that here the German citizens living in Poland, and, and the Germans are invading and throwing bombs on them. Okay, okay. I'm looking at my wife because she's here, to kind of keep an eye on me, so I don't say anything real stupid. Anyway, and sometimes I have to ask her things, for stuff. And of course, she's taking care of the puppy also. So there she is. So yeah. So there was my mom. She said, she was out there, and with me in her arms, walking out in the fields, just even being away from the house, in case they would shoot at the house, where she was. And she made it through. And so the Germans came in about 2 weeks or so. The whole Poland was invaded and defeated, and it was over. But it wasn't really over because there was the Poles. They were a tenacious bunch, and they resisted constantly, and they were partisans. And I do remember that every once in a while the partisans were caught by the Nazis, which at the time occupied Poland. The Germans, the Nazi Germans that occupied Poland. I remember seeing people hanging from gallows. Yeah. And my mom, said, don't look. But yeah, they were hanging from gallows. I remember that. So that was, by that time, I was, I don't know, about 3-4 years old or so, Okay. So to continue a little bit further about this war business, it became clear to my parents that things are not going well for the Germans, and they need to do something. So my dad and my mom, they were proactive, and they decided that maybe they ought to move west. So they ought to move west, into German territory. And, out of Poland, because, the Russians were at the gates, basically. And the reason, so what my dad decided to do is they went and collected whatever they could collect, had boxes made, and carried them by truck and whatnot to my grandparents, who had a house, farther away from the center of Poland, more in the Wategau, in Gernau, or the Poles used to call it Skierz, and the Germans called it Gernau. So anyway, so they decided to bury what they thought were their treasures, on the property of my grandparents. And so I do remember that there was a big hole, and they had, forklifts, and that kind of thing, I was little, but I wasn't scared. It was, it was just, hey, this is fun. We're going someplace different. By that time, I already had a brother named Heinz, and so my dad thought, well, you know what, this isn't so good, because it's still Poland. But, they were kind of reluctant to leave because, they had all this stuff, they had a life, and as a matter of fact, my dad was always planning to retire at age 40, okay? He planned to retire at age 40, and you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to raise bees in the Carpathian Mountains. Yeah, he loved the Carpathian Mountains. He used to go there hiking and things. And he loved that. And so he wanted to raise bees. And they were making plenty of money. So it would have, if the Germans actually had won, or it would have come to some sort of a armistice and maybe a peace agreement of some, and that the Germans could stay in Poland where they were, yeah, it would have happened. He would have retired at 40. But that was not to be, because he decided that his family needs to be safe. And so he sent my mom with 5 wooden boxes that she had to take care of stuff that they wanted to take along, and a really big kind of leather suitcase, with all the important stuff. Okay. And so, where did they go to? Well, so they decided, well, let's just go to the Sudetenland. I mean, it's still under German occupation, and yeah, it's kind of Czech, but a lot of Germans in Sudetenland, because it was kind of the same thing. Czechoslovakia was also, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at one time, and so there were a lot of Germans in Czechoslovakia. So my dad moved us to a town called Zwittau. That was the German name. And if you look on the map right now, then you see it as Svitavia or some crazy thing like that, Crazy? It's their own town, okay? I found out that actually, who was Schindler? Schindler was actually born in Zwittau. So he was there when I was there, okay? The Schindler's List guy? Yeah. So, in any case, so yeah, that was still part of Germany. So, why did my dad not go with us and stay with us? Well, all young men were supposed to be in the army. And he thought that, he would be drafted and become cannon fodder here at the very end. And so he decided it'd be best for him to just kind of move around. And so what he did is he stayed with friends. But I also remember him coming to visit in Zwittau. He was there.
Heinz was born.
Yeah. So, well, actually, Heinz was born still in Radom, so.
Okay.
Because Heinz was 3 and I was 4 going on 5, so, I mean, they got busy, they got busy. Yeah, there was, my mom always wanted to have a large family, so whenever she could have kids, she did. Well, she had 5 of us, so there you go.
Good for her.
Yeah. So anyway, so we wound up in Zwittau. And I think, maybe I should just kind of stop with the video right here, because Zwittau is probably...
But the story was just getting good.
Zwittau is its own story, because, I mean, we spent probably the better part of a year there, and then we had to move again.
But talk about the train, at least, on the fire coming into the train.
Oh yeah, but see, that wasn't Zwittau actually. Oh. That was so what happened, and I think I talked about it in a previous video about Schönstedt. Okay, so the Russians, caught us up in Zwittau. Okay, but they still let us go. So we went again to the German area, which was Thüringen. And I wound up in the town called Schönstedt, okay? And now I don't know how my mom chose that or whether my dad chose that, but my dad wasn't with us at that time. So we wound up in Schönstedt, and from Schönstedt we had that hell ride, in the train for 2 weeks. It was awful. But yeah, that'll be a video by itself. But I think I'm going to talk about life in Zwittau, maybe on my next video.
Okay.
So, with that, I think I'll bid you farewell. It was really nice talking to you, and thank you for your help, Mom, and keeping the dog in good shape.
He fell asleep.
Yeah, he fell asleep. Well, you know what? You talked about this. You said your voice is soothing because you fall asleep listening to these things. So, anyway, it's great. In that case, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye, and Servus. We'll talk again with the next video.